It is episode 113 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Here's the headline. Fox News, the Trump trial with a side of college protests and a dash of woke Boy Scouts.
A lot of people have felt the same way about the New York Times, and their coverage historically tilts to favor the political left. But the New York Times editor came out over the weekend on Sunday, and he said, among other things, it's our job at the New York Times to cover the full range of issues that people have. We become an instrument of the Biden campaign. So people are talking, Matt, just about how the New York Times suddenly is going, we're not just going to put out stuff that is favorable to Joe Biden. We're going to be fair. We're going to talk about things with the Trump campaign as well.
Yeah, and this is crazy. This is a dispute that goes back at least 5 years. There was a kind of an amazing story that came out in Politico over the weekend, detailing from both sides, from both the Biden administration and the New York Times, this problem that's developed between Biden and the Times. And it goes back to the campaign when Biden was running for president, and the campaign believed they didn't assign a paper who was properly invested, was the term, in seeing the charm and the appeal of Joe Biden. And the administration has continued since then to believe somehow that the New York Times is not sufficiently worshipful of Joe Biden. I mean, I don't know what planet they're living on. If you read the Times, there's almost nothing ever negative about the guy in the paper. So that shows you how delusional the White House is about these things.
Now, if you didn't recognize that voice and the one reference to Matt in the clip that Steve Doocy said there, that is none other than Matt Taibbi, who at one time was considered a great journalist, is now considered someone who will do the bidding of a corporation, for clicks and Substack followers, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Mr. Taibbi. I know that basically when you go so far left, it's really easy to just trip over to the right, much like Tulsi Gabbard. The political horseshoe is incredibly real. I think it's really, and I'll describe that. The political horseshoe is when you get so far to the extremes of the left and right, you start kind of looking right at the two extremes and they seem very similar. When I was a researcher of extremism, I often found verbatim, word for word, conspiracies promoted on both the far right and the far left. Seth Rich being one of them, one of many. Any goofy conspiracy theory about the CIA or FBI was often found on both. Surveillance often found in both. I'm not saying that the CIA is perfect and doesn't do shady things. Of course they do. Or that surveillance, rights are abused in this country. Of course they are. But I also believe that the government should keep some secrets because we have enemies. And I'm not a big fan of putting out military secrets that put sources at risk, soldiers at risk, intelligence agents at risk. Not a fan at all of that. So I think it's a very delicate thing that needs to be handled very carefully. Anyway, that was Matt Taibbi on Fox and Friends from Wednesday. And the original segment was supposed to be about NPR, which is legitimate because there was a congressional hearing about the supposed bias at NPR. I captured that and made a condensed version for the paid subscribers that I posted yesterday. That was very interesting. That's a legitimate thing to discuss no matter what you think of NPR, because NPR does receive some taxpayer money. But for whatever reason, Steve Doocy decided to just bring up the New York Times, which is crazy because the New York Times is a private company. They can do whatever they want. And so they just start talking about New York Times, and I just always find clips like that funny when anyone on Fox News has the gall to complain about journalistic integrity or bias in other media, because I'm like, are you kidding me? You guys openly shill for Trump. You got caught openly lying, knowingly lying about fraud in the 2020 election. and paid out the largest defamation settlement in the history of defamation lawsuits to Dominion voting systems. It wasn't even a gray area. They had Fox top executives and hosts openly saying, yeah, we knew this wasn't true. We promoted it anyway because we were worried about our shareholders, and we were worried about the stock price, and we were worried about our viewership, losing it to OANN or Newsmax. Blatantly admitting that they're propaganda. So yes, Matt Taibbi, I'm sure you make more money now that you, have sucked up to the right wing and given up on any semblance of integrity yourself. He did get an award by some crazy right wing journalistic organization, so they call themselves, last year. They gave it to him and Michael Schellenberger, which is an absolute joke because I have an entire collection on mistakes made by Michael Schellenberger that are pretty easy to debunk. So yes, and I will say this very quickly before we move on. I just stuck that on the front because I wanted to share that clip. It doesn't really fit with anything else, but it was a jaw dropper for me. Just like, oh, here we go, Matt Taibbi. Why don't you get your own show on Fox? I'm sorry, if you hear Thor right now, he's very vocal. I don't know why. Just very briefly, I live in the same size of an apartment. It's 450 square feet, which is roughly a one-car garage. And there's no rooms. It's just one room. So just picture all of your worldly belongings in a kitchen and a bathroom in a one-car garage. That is my world. So when my cats get crazy, yes, Thor, there's not much I can do about it. But I figure lean into the skid. Yes, sweetie. He's just very vocal right now. Odin never makes a sound, so we don't have to worry about the mama's boy goth poet. That's what I call him. Anyway, I just want to say very briefly before I move on to the next clip, Matt Taibbi is sort of a great example of why I don't like extremists. He recently posted this very self-important clip or statement about how his most important thing for the next election is surveillance and government overreach and yada, yada, yada. And I said, okay, so just throw all the women under the bus, throw with abortion, throw anyone who's on the ACA or AKA Obamacare under the bus. Who cares? Surveillance, government surveillance that probably doesn't affect, 95% of Americans, but you've got to be worried about that. So who cares about, half the country and a lot of poor people? They don't matter. I'm obviously being sarcastic there, but here we go. Just wanted to preface so no one's like, what did she just say? Here we go. So last week, Fox News shifted some of its focus back to Trump's criminal hush money trial and the Israel-Hamas war, while also promoting misinformation about abortion and scaring its viewers about the perceived woke takeover of the Boy Scouts of America. For the past few weeks, the network has spent an inordinate amount of time covering college protests related to the Israel-Hamas war, but has largely ignored the conflict itself. Segments about the protests took up over twice as much airtime as stories related to the actual war. The network isn't doing a great job of covering Trump's criminal hush money trial, as most of Fox coverage centers on Trump's whiny rants before and after his court appearances, as well as extended segments meant to discredit various witnesses. Trump appears to be consuming a lot of Fox News coverage, as he repeatedly cited Fox News legal analysts Jonathan Turley, Andrew McCarthy, Alan Dershowitz, and Greg Jarrett, as well as Fox News host Mark Levin, in his court-related tirades. When the network wasn't hyping up college demonstrations or trashing everyone involved in Trump's criminal case, it was acting as a publicist for the former president. Fox cut into a live broadcast of The Five to show the former president walk into an FDNY firehouse with boxes of what looked like extremely old pizza. Anyone exclusively watching a lot of Fox News last week might have missed out on developments in the war in Ukraine, a growing humanitarian crisis in Sudan, and a lawsuit involving the Biden administration's proposed emission standards for trucks. The shows that I watched last week included Fox and Friends the first hour, The Five, and Hannity. Now, the first clip, this is a fun one. A rare rebellious moment by a legit news reporter on Fox. He did this last week. I should say 2 weeks ago, and he did it last week again. And this is my new favorite Fox personality, Eric Shawn. Here we go. This is from Monday. He's talking about the Trump hush money case.
Waiting to see if Judge Juan Merchan will sock the former president with $4,000 more in gag order violations on top of the $9,000 that he ponied up last Friday. We'll see if that comes. As for who testifies this morning, Brian, we just don't know. Prosecutors are keeping that under wraps because they don't want the former president to attack whoever the witness is on True Social when he speaks out in the courtroom. So we'll, when we find out who it is, we'll let you know. But right now, we don't know who's going to take the stand.
But Eric, is it safe to say the big witnesses? You got Stormy Daniels, McDougal, and you have Cohen. Like, who's the other big witnesses? That's it, right?
Yeah, those. Well, they could be some of the witnesses. There also could be some people that we don't know about who were involved in processing some of these payments.
Well, those are the big
we'll just
names.
have to see. No sign of. Yeah. They are the big ones.
Thank you, Eric. Let's bring in.
Now, you might have missed that because Eric Shawn has a very subtle, almost monotone way of delivering the news, which is actually quite professional for the role he has. You're not really supposed to put too much on to something like that. You're just reading basic facts about what happened at the trial. Now, I'm just going to read from the transcript. So here we go. As far as who testifies this morning, Brian, we just don't know. Prosecutors are keeping that under wraps because they don't want the former president to attack whoever the witness is on Truth Social when he speaks out in the courtroom. So he just basically explained why there is a gag order on President Trump, which is no one else on the network has said. Pretty much everyone on Fox acts as if the gag order is to somehow harm Trump's campaign or harm his defense in this case, which it is not. It's because they know that somebody with millions of loyal, rabid followers, if he goes on Truth Social or Twitter, just as he did with Ruby Freeman, the Georgia election worker, if he starts disparaging this person publicly, they could be faced with, hundreds, if not thousands of death threats and harassment all day long, all night long, phone calls to the point that they break their phone. That's what happened to Ruby Freeman. She had, her phone stopped working because it was just call after call after call after call. And people showed up at one of her family's homes. All kinds of horrendous things happened to her. And she got to the point that she wouldn't even use her name in public. So that is why the judge is like, yeah, knock it off. Because you want to have a fair trial where people can come in and feel free to speak freely. I forgot to do this the last clip. My sister, who does not listen to the podcast, but that does not trouble me in the slightest because she'd probably give me notes. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay without getting annoying notes from my sister. But she used to be a huge Matt Taibbi fan, and she's become completely disillusioned about him in recent years. And when I was just home to see my, I shouldn't say home because I've lived here for 23 years. This is my home. But I was just at my family home in St. Louis, Missouri, to see my niece for her graduation from college. And both me and my sister were doing sort of dueling Matt Taibbi impressions. So here's my Matt Taibbi impression.
I think the real problem right now is government surveillance. And, we can just wait for things like abortion and universal health care and various programs for lower income or poor people or the border crisis or schools. It doesn't matter because if, the government is spying on people who are talking to people in foreign countries, then that's a real problem. And it needs to be stopped immediately. You figure it out. You can just, you figure out how to get an abortion on your own. I don't really understand why that's my problem. I'm passionately dedicated to journalism and who will ever pay me the most money. Thank you very much. Matt Taibbi.
Okay, it's terrible. But just speak out of the side of your mouth, mumble everything, and then just, joke about sexually assaulting Russian women in one of your books. It's great. Not a huge fan. I was never a fan of Matt Taibbi, but my sister was, and then was slowly over the years, lost all of his luster to her. The Russian women thing was the first, and then it was one thing after the other. And she's just like, he's disgusting. And I'm like, I told you. Anyway, moving on. Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi. Once I start doing it, I can't stop doing it. It's like Judge Janine takes over. Okay, so next one is Mike Huckabee. This one's great. This is gaslighting on a level that is insane. And I added some clips to this that aren't in the newsletter because they're harder to translate in the newsletter. But these are clips that sort of demonstrate that Mike Huckabee is just making up reality. This is from Tuesday. Mike Huckabee was a guest on Hannity, and he's talking about Donald J. Trump.
I remember Joe Biden getting sworn in January 21st of 2021. Seems like he got sworn in because Donald Trump had already vacated the White House and moved out. So there was no attempt to hold on to power, to call the military in, to keep him in there. That's nonsense. It's another one of the big, massive lies that the Democrats have told.
Yes. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
Who hides evidence? Criminals hide evidence, not honest people. So, over the next 10 days, we get to see the machines that are crooked, the ballots that are fraudulent, and if we're wrong, we will be made fools of. But if we're right, a lot of them will go to jail. So, let's have trial by combat.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal.
I feel like I should have issued a trigger warning before playing that, but I know most of my audience is my age or older, mostly, so you guys are probably like, trigger warning, what? Anyway. But yeah, the sound of his voice, especially in the context of that first clip, is the phone call he made to the Georgia election officials where he basically tried to intimidate them to just give him votes. The second was Rudy Giuliani at right before the January 6th riot occurred. And the third was, again, Trump again right before the January 6th riot occurred. Now, I'm going to go through, this is about a page long, of all of the other specific reasons why Mike Huckabee saying that he never challenged the courts is absolute nonsense. So here we go. Despite assurances from his own Departments of Justice and Homeland Security that the 2020 election was fair, Trump's lawyers filed 62 lawsuits in multiple states related to his claims of election fraud. His team lost all but one case. Now, before I keep going, hyperlinks galore in the newsletter. If you want to check out any of my sources, I've got some really good ones. Here we go. The decision came from both Democrat and Republican appointed judges, including federal judges appointed by Trump himself. The lone victory for Trump's legal team was a small one. According to reporting by USA Today, a Pennsylvania judge sided with the Trump campaign, ruling that voters could not go back and cure their ballots if they failed to provide proper identification 3 days after the election. The ruling affected few votes and did not change the outcome in Pennsylvania, which Biden won by 81,660 votes. Even the Supreme Court, where Trump nominated 3 justices, has ruled against the former president twice in cases related to his election fraud claims. Trump also requested multiple recounts in more than one state. Each recount reaffirmed Biden's wins. Trump's legal team also attempted to challenge the results of the election through the use of alternative electors in Arizona, Michigan, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Nevada. All told, 84 Republicans in 7 states falsely claimed to be Donald Trump's presidential electors in December 2020. Trump also appeared to try to intimidate election officials in Georgia to negate the election results in that state. In a notorious hour-long phone call, Trump repeatedly vaguely threatened the Georgia's Republican Secretary of State with a criminal offense if he didn't, quote unquote, find 11,780 votes to help him overturn the election. Last August, a grand jury in Georgia indicted former President Donald J. Trump and 18 of his allies on violations of 16 Georgia statutes for his attempts to overturn the election in that state. These charges include violations of Georgia's Racketeer Influence and Corruption Organizations Act, or RICO. Trump also sat in the White House dining room as an angry mob at the Capitol building attempted to delay the certification of electoral votes for President Joe Biden. Over 140 police officers were injured, and at least 7 deaths were directly linked to the violent riot on January 6, 2021. It was Vice President Mike Pence, not the president, who called in the National Guard to help quell the riot and defend the Capitol. Don't even get me started. Oh, I hate this man so much. Now, since we're in the middle of the podcast, I should give a shout out to my sponsor. And that sponsor would not be a billionaire who wrote me a check. It would not be a wealthy financier. It would not be my wealthy parents, because my parents aren't wealthy. My dad was an auto mechanic. It would not be some type of corporate sponsor who's telling me what to say and pulling puppet strings. No, it is hundreds of people who have become paid subscribers to my Substack or paid supporters to my Patreon. If you'd like to become a financial sponsor of this tiny micro-budget media project, you can go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News or my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. I just sent something out on Monday that was basically, I took that whole hearing from NPR and condensed it down. I should have some more stuff coming. I have some stuff brewing, as it were. I'm kind of always working on something, and I share it with that group exclusively. If you can't afford to become a paid subscriber, I totally understand. The best thing to do, if you can't, is to share the podcast, share the newsletter, give me a good review somewhere. It's most appreciated. Again, this is a newsroom of one in a 450 square foot apartment with 2 crazy, wacky cats who are making a lot of noise this broadcast, and I apologize for that. So moving on. So this one's just called The Folks at Fox and Friends Need a Basic U.S. History Lesson. Now, when I was a little kid in school, I actually complained that it felt like we learned U.S. history over and over and over again every single year. It's like the same exact stories. We start with like the colonies, how they were, formed, and then how the United States was formed. And like every little aspect of the Revolutionary War was sort of drilled into us. But apparently some incredibly well-paid folks at Fox News missed some details, because this was just so hilarious to me. They were discussing the protests in college campuses, and Ansley Einhart actually said something to the effect of like, what would George Washington think of these protests? And Brian Kilmeade chimed in, and I'll just play the clip, but I was like, okay, wow.
All right, thank you so much, Lucas. What would George Washington say about this? And
I think he'd be quite upset. I just gave you a country, and this is how you treat
me? Exactly. They call it the hatchet because when we learned the song, when George Washington was just a little boy, he had a little hatchet that he thought was just a toy. He chopped down the cherry tree. His mother said, "Oh my."
But we can't.
Okay, this segment didn't really make sense even in the larger context. I wish I could play a larger clip and you'd go, oh, I get why they're talking about George Washington. I didn't get it, and I watched it more than once because I went back and went, why are they talking about George Washington? Now, in previous segments, they had shown statues of George Washington that people had defaced, some of the protesters had defaced, and put a kefir on his head, which is the Palestinian scarf, and wrapped him with a Palestinian flag. Many folks would find that disrespectful. I don't really get that attached either way to statues or inanimate objects, so I don't really have much of a reaction to it, just other than like, it's kind of rude, especially, George Washington was a flawed man. Most of our founding fathers were slave owners. This is true, but it doesn't mean that, they also were revolutionaries against a tyrannical king, and I'm very, very incredibly grateful for the Constitution and especially the First Amendment, which we'll get into later. But so you can have the thing about the United States is it's both wonderful and horrible at the same time. And the men who founded this country had wonderful things about them and horrible things, like every human being, I would say. I don't think there's a single human being on this planet that's pure good or pure evil. Most people are a combination. There's some people that are pure evil, but we won't get into that. But anyway, so there's no historical basis for the nursery rhyme about George Washington and a cherry tree. I'm not sure why she was talking about that. George Washington was an actual revolutionary who led an army against the British in the Revolutionary War and went on to become the first president of the United States. Although Washington wasn't quite as young as most college students, he was only 44 years old in 1776. Most of the founding fathers were quite young during the Revolutionary War. That same year, Alexander Hamilton was only 21, while Thomas Jefferson was 33 and Betsy Ross was only 24. It's impossible to know how Washington would have reacted to college protesters, but the U.S. Constitution that he signed in 1787 and later the Bill of Rights in 1791 that he helped ratify enshrined the rights of citizens to peacefully protest and to speak freely without the fear of criminal prosecution. The First Amendment is one of the greatest accomplishments of the Founding Fathers. And I have this memorized. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. A user on Twitter tried to argue that the college protests were similar to the Whiskey Rebellion that was thwarted during the Washington administration in 1794. This is a poor example, as the Whiskey Rebellion was very much a violent armed insurrection aimed at the newly formed U.S. government. The college protests have been mostly nonviolent, with some vandalism and property damage. The demonstrations are also not directed at the U.S. government, and they are not an attempt to overthrow or replace any freely elected officials. I say mostly nonviolent because there might have been an incident here or there, but I have not seen, and I've seen a lot because I watch Fox that does nothing but cover these protests. I have not seen any widespread use of violence, none whatsoever. I've seen they broke into a building in Columbia. They've done similar stunts at other campuses, but I haven't seen, the only violence I've seen is by the police sort of tossing protesters around in certain states, especially Texas and in Georgia. Some of the clips from Emory and the clips from University of Texas at Austin are pretty rough to watch. But yeah, I would not call these protests violent at all. And I think it's astounding that there's been over 2,000 arrests and no major injuries and no deaths. That's amazing. No matter how you feel about these protests, I know people have very strong feelings about these protests, and I understand that. They have been non-violent. Now, this next clip is also related to the pro-Palestine protests. A young woman named Yola Ashkenazi, a Jewish senior at Columbia University, went on Fox and Friends to talk to Brian Kilmeade about her concerns surrounding the pro-Palestine campus protests. Now, this is a very interesting interaction because Miss Ashkenazi had no idea that she was basically describing Fox News when she made her remarks about the media.
The attack to the day.
Yeah.
And you're concerned that not enough attention's on the real problem. Hamas, the terrorists, and gutting them out of Gaza once and for all. We're missing the story.
We're totally missing the mark. Everyone right now is focusing on what's going on the college campuses. What are these protesters doing? They say they're pro-Palestinian, but if they were pro-Palestinian, they would make sure the media coverage was on what's actually going on in Israel and in Gaza. What's happening in Gaza is so horrible. Seeing the people starving because Hamas steals all of the humanitarian aid, it's horrible. Maybe if the media covered that and not these college students, these privileged college students who are camping out on campuses, we might actually get to a place where all of this can end. Or if people focus on the over 130 hostages who for now are 7 months in captivity of Hamas, including a girl 19 years old. Her name's Naama Levy. She's 19, younger than me, being held by people who we know are rapists and nobody cares. And now these students are taking all the attention away from the atrocities of what is going on, from the fact that Hamas is a terrorist organization, And they're just for this, for what? To do these theatrics on campus?
And
now, I would largely agree with Miss Ashkenazi on her statement there to a point. And that point would be that the protesters do not pick and have no control, really, how the press portrays them or how much time the press spends on them. These protests could be far more boring, just people just sitting, in a circle, and the press would probably still be there with their cameras. The only thing a protester can do is if you see somebody promoting something very hateful that you don't agree with and you're in the same protest, you can say, hey, what are you doing? If you see somebody with a poster that's very it's encouraging violence or saying something bigoted or horrible, you can say, knock it off. That's about it. Everybody's sort of responsible for their own actions. There's only so much you can do. You can also leave a protest if you don't feel comfortable. I've done that. If you're like, yeah, I don't like these people. They're scaring me a little bit. I'm out. You can do that as well. But the media controls what the media does. So I wouldn't blame the protesters for the inordinate amount of press coverage they've gotten. I would blame the press for that. I think it's partly due to the fact that it's just easier to send a correspondent up to the Upper West Side of Manhattan to sit around Columbia University and say obvious things like, look, there's tents, and look, there's food, and look, there's people. Basically that's what they did. When I watched Fox and Friends report on the police breaking up the protests at UCLA, that's basically what it was. 3 hours of people saying completely obvious things like, oh, they're handcuffing a protester now. Really? Oh, look, there's a gas mask. Wonder where they got that. It was like completely stupid. But that's what they're going to do. At the same time, I will point out, for the week ending May 5th, 2024, Fox News spent 67% of its airtime covering the college protests, while only dedicating 0.8% of its coverage to the Israel-Hamas war. Fox News rarely mentions the war unless they can use it to criticize the Biden administration. Last week, segments about the protests, so this is just this past week, took up 14% of the airtime in the shows I covered, while the war only accounted for 6% of programming. The last time a family member of a hostage held in Gaza appeared on Fox and Friends was November 29th, 2023. In contrast, on May 2nd, 2024, PBS included an interview with the aunt of a hostage taken by Hamas. The PBS NewsHour has consistently included segments about families of the hostages in the United States and Israel, as well as the protests surrounding their captivity since the October 7th attack. And there have been several massive protests in Israel regarding the hostages that Fox has largely ignored. Now, I don't watch every show on Fox, so I'm just going to preface that with these are based on the shows that I cover on Fox, which tend to be the more popular, opinionated-based shows. So, yeah, sadly, what she said was very true about the media, but she was appearing on media that's part of the problem, which would be Fox News, even though she probably was not aware of that. Moving on, we get on to everybody's favorite, Kellyanne Conway. I say this, Miss Alternative Facts. It's my Kellyanne Conway impression. Miss Alternative Facts. It's got a very coquettish way of speaking with a slight New Jersey accent. It's Alternative Facts. Facts. Okay, so this is Kellyanne Conway appearing on Hannity, and I went, what did she just say? What did she just say? They were talking about abortion, and before this, it was hard to clip it, but Hannity was actually trying to make the case that somehow Biden would flip-flop on abortion. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to. No Democrat, after what happened with the Dobbs case, is ever going to remotely flip-flop on that one. Are you kidding me? So he was going like way, way back, like showing clips that were over 20 years old, where Biden, being a Catholic, was a little bit more kind of undecided or a little bit grayer on the issue of abortion. And now he's very much, pro reproductive rights. So this is, and that came before the segment where Kellyanne Conway comes on to talk about abortion. And I just went, well, good luck with that, Good luck with that.
Look, there's no question this year abortion could be a vote multiplier and a turnout intensifier for the Democrats. It basically is all they have. Maybe you could throw an electric vehicle here and there, a little bit of climate change, but that's about it. It's mainly abortion. But Joe Biden, Shawn, he's gone the opposite way of science. He's a science denier. Over time, we have learned so much more about gestational development, sonograms. We know what we see. Joe Biden and the rest of them have become science and deniers. The left runs around science, facts, and they look at a sonogram of a 5-month-old and they pretend they don't see the male organ, the baby sucking its thumb and waving at mom and dad.
So I just want to preface that Conway is using a confusing term to describe an ultrasound, because when that last statement where she says a child is waving to its parents in a sonogram, which is absolutely impossible, made me think, well, are you talking about the moving image from an ultrasound? Because a sonogram is a photograph from an ultrasound. So just to get that out of the way, because that was driving me crazy. I was like, what are you talking about? So absolutely no fetus is waving at anyone in the womb. The average fetus at 5 months gestation weighs about a half a pound to a pound and is on average 10 inches long. Even a full-term fetus would have no awareness that an ultrasound was being performed and would not have the capacity to wave at anyone. According to The Bump, yes, I looked this up. This is how big of a nerd I am. A website for new parents, on average, a baby cannot wave until it's around 9 months old post-birth. So you're talking about a 9-month-old after it's been born, then it sort of waves. Okay, so the same technology, I'm sorry I'm laughing at that. I just went, waving at your parents? Have you lost your mind? So the same technology that is used to show expecting parents the overall health of their future child can also spot severe pregnancy complications that could put the mother's life at risk or indicate a non-viable pregnancy. According to the Mayo Clinic, about 10 to 20% of pregnancies end naturally before 20 weeks due to pregnancy complications or problems with the development of the fetus. The number could be quite higher as many miscarriages occur extremely early in pregnancy. Arbitrary bans on abortions after 6, 12, or 15 weeks do not consider mothers who experience extreme complications later in pregnancy. Abortion rights activists and many doctors argue that it really should be left up to physicians and their patients to decide the best course of treatment regarding an unviable fetus or a pregnancy complication. So if you're going to talk about science, we got a lot to talk about here. And the science of sonograms and ultrasounds have been around for quite some time, and people still very much have voted across this country that they still want reproductive rights and they want women to have the option of an abortion. And I should add pregnant people as well. So yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that argument. I don't think that's going to work. So next up, we have one of those moments where Steve Doocy sort of accidentally fact-checked Shawn Hannity before Shawn Hannity spoke. I'll explain. So on Wednesday on Hannity, Shawn Hannity made a claim about the Boy Scouts of America changing their name due to pressure from the political left. And I immediately went, what? No. And I had anticipated this. I don't know why, but I anticipated this. And I had already clipped and cut out a section of Steve Doocy talking about the very same thing from that morning. So basically what had happened on Wednesday on Fox and Friends, Steve Doocy had made a comment about the Boy Scouts changing their name. Later that night, Shawn Hannity did, and I just stuck the two clips together, putting Hannity first, being sort of fact-checked if you went back in time by Steve Doocy. So here are the clips.
And the Boy Scouts of America are now extinct. Why? Because of woke left-wing politics. And, all right, another day, another organization has fallen victim to the woke mob. Yesterday, the Boy Scouts of America announced they're changing their name to Scouting America in an attempt to be more inclusive.
Dry up. One of the reasons behind this, in addition to the trying to be more inclusive, they say, and the rebranding is, you know, and I was a Boy Scout for like, I don't know, 7, 8 years.
So last year.
It was a lot of fun. Right up until last year.
You could make a fire with 2 sticks.
I could, and I can do lashings and nuts and semaphore.
Slip nuts.
But here's the thing. They had to rebrand because they went bankrupt, because they were facing $2.5 billion worth of abuse claims because of Boy Scout leaders back in the day.
So I found that kind of sad, actually, because I was a hardcore Girl Scout. So I could kind of feel the pain in Ducey's voice when he was talking about, at one hand, being a scout and loving it, and then saying, oh, yeah, by the way, they had to pay out $2.5 billion worth of abuse claims. And then he didn't say sexual abuse. He stopped himself. But it was sexual abuse. I will give him credit for correctly citing the amount of settlements the organization is paying out. It's a tragic, horrible story. And I understand that kind of pain because it would break me if I found out the same thing was happening in Girl Scouts of America. My family has been deeply, deeply involved with Girl Scouts of America for multiple generations, 3 at least. So according to the Boy Scouts of America, more than 7,800 of its former leaders were involved in sexually abusing children over the course of 72 years. The actual number of abuse victims could be quite higher, as most victims don't report sexual abuse. According to the Boy Scouts of America, BSA, more than 7,800 of its former leaders were involved in sexually abusing a child over the course of 72 years. The actual number of abuse victims could be quite higher, as most victims don't report sexual abuse. According to reporting by Voice of America, VOA, the organization also started allowing girls to join the Cub Scouts, its program for children ages 7 to 10 years, in 2018. BSA says that more than 176,000 girls have joined BSA since the changes, with more than 6,000 obtaining the prestigious rank of Eagle Scout. The BSA is under a bankruptcy reorganization plan that allows it to operate while spending, and the actual number is $2.4 billion, not $2.5 billion, to compensate more than 82,000 men who sued the organization, claiming they were sexually abused during their scouting years. The BSA has enacted new rules and regulations meant to prevent sexual abuse of minors. I just want to say very quickly, as a huge supporter of the Girl Scouts of America, it's a completely separate organization that is not affiliated with the Boy Scouts of America, and the GSA has not grappled with any systemic cases of sexual abuse since the organization was formed in 1912. I am such a Girl Scout weirdo fan that I'm still friends with members from my troop from childhood, and weirdly, the founder of the Girl Scouts was named Juliet Lowe, different spelling, same first name. She had the French, I have the British. And the first Girl Scout troop ever was held on the same day that happens to be my birthday, just many, many years prior. So March 12th. So I'm a huge, like crazy, like I still have my sash, and I had like an insane amount of badges. I just could not get enough of Girl Scouts. It fell apart basically because I switched schools and went from Catholic school to public school, and then the troop kind of disintegrated as we got older. But yeah, amazing organization, big, huge fan. And I feel terrible for the Boy Scouts who were abused. And I'm happy that the organization is trying to repair the damage and move forward. And I had a lot of comments from people who are active in BSA on Twitter about the many specific changes the organization has made to ensure the safety of children. And I wish them nothing but the best, and I hope that there is no more abuse in the future and that things move forward in a positive light. Of course I do. So before we move on to the very ending part of the podcast, I have to do it, because if I don't, I'm gonna get them out. Get comments like, where was it? I waited for it. Where was it? And here we go. I'll do it as if I'm her. Here we go. I'm Judge Janine, and I just came back from a graduation ceremony of this young woman named Ava Eisenhower. She got her BA, I think it's a BA, not a BS. I'm not sure. I asked her. There was some confusion. I think it's a BA in political science with a minor in communications. What good is communications? Even my niece Ava Eisenhower was laughing about it. As she said, she's taking a leap year. She's not sure what she's going to do. She'll probably go to grad school or law school. I'm hoping for either one. I sat her down and I said, listen, if you want to get a better job, you got to go for the advanced degree. It's kind of true. At least it changed my life completely. But anyway, that's my Judge Janine. And here's the thing. She threw a pen last week. She threw a pen, but it wasn't very photogenic. The camera didn't capture it, or trust me, I would have pounced on that. She threw a pen, and then somebody said, "Did you throw a pen?" And she's like, "That's what I do!" And I was like, Judge Jeanine, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, this last segment, stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories PBS covered that Fox News did not. We're going to start with updates in the war in Ukraine. Russia warned the UK that it would hold drills simulating the use of battlefield nuclear weapons after the Ukrainian military used UK-supplied weapons in Russian territory. Russia said they might target British military facilities and equipment on Ukrainian soil or elsewhere. The Ukrainian Security Service, or SBU, said it foiled a Russian plot to kill President Volodymyr Zelensky and other high-ranking Ukrainian officials. The plot involved serving colonels who were allegedly hired as moles. Ukrainian drones and missiles hit nearly a dozen Ukrainian energy facilities. Russia also damaged 2 hydroelectric plants. The Russians have targeted power plants across Ukraine for months in an attempt to disrupt its power supply. The European Union has agreed to a deal that would allow Ukraine to use the proceeds from frozen Russian assets to buy weapons. The first $1 billion could be available by this summer. PBS produced a segment on a Ukrainian nonprofit called the Superhuman Center, which helps soldiers and citizens receive prosthetic limbs, reconstructive surgery, and physical and psychological support. Since the war began, some 20,000 to 50,000 Ukrainians have lost one or more limbs. More than 4,000 people were evacuated from the Kharkiv region as the Russian military advanced on the border city. Moving on to the rest of the news, the full list of winners for the 2024 Pulitzer Prizes were announced last Monday, honoring American achievements in journalism, letters, and drama and music. A new study in JAMA, Journal for the American Medical Association, found that hormone replacement therapy, HRT, is safe and effective for treating menopausal symptoms. The benefits of HRT can outweigh the risks. The names and banking information for thousands of British soldiers were exposed in a data breach by a malign actor who may have had state help. British defense officials said Tuesday. As many as 272,000 members of the armed forces might have had their personal information exposed. An independent report found rampant sexual harassment, racial bias, and other misconduct at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC. The report described the agency as having a good old boys club atmosphere. Rescue teams in South Africa worked nonstop to try to find more survivors after a collapse of an apartment building that was under construction. At least 32 people have died, with authorities expecting the number to rise. Another 20 workers are still missing. More than 600 emergency services and other personnel have been involved in the search and rescue operation. An appeals court in China upheld a ban on a popular protest song, Glory to Hong Kong. It was the first time a song has been banned in the city since Britain handed the territory back to Chinese rule in 1997. The failed cryptocurrency exchange FTX will distribute $14.5 to $16.3 billion to creditors. Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of FTX, was sentenced to 25 years in prison earlier this year for stealing $8 billion from customers. Live Nation has settled 9 of 10 wrongful death lawsuits stemming from a crowd surge at a Travis Scott concert at the Astro World Music Festival. The cause of death was compression asphyxia, which an expert compared to being crushed by a car. The victims ranged from age 9 to 27. 2 new statues will be added to Statuary Hall collection in Washington, D.C. Arkansas will include statues of Daisy Bates, a journalist and civil rights icon, and the singer-songwriter Johnny Cash. 2 older statues representing the state will be removed from the collection. Russia celebrated Victory Day, which marks the anniversary of the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Putin used the day as a propaganda tool to praise forces fighting in Ukraine, while criticizing the West for fueling conflicts around the world. Several state attorneys general are suing the Biden administration in California over the EPA's new emissions limits for gas-powered trucks. The new EPA rules are slated to take effect for model years 2027 through 2032. And the agency has said they will avoid up to 1 billion tons of greenhouse gases emissions over the next 3 decades. The World Video Game Hall of Fame will induct 5 new games recognizing Asteroids, Myst, Resident Evil, SimCity, and Ultima. The Hall of Fame recognizes electronic games of all types: arcade, console, computer, handheld, and mobile. PBS produced a segment about a new electric battery-powered plane. The Federal Aviation Administration approved the first training program in the country for electric aviation. Eden Golan, a 20-year-old singer representing Israel, faced angry protest as she competed in the Eurovision Song Contest in Sweden. Pro-Palestinian protesters wanted Israel removed from the competition due to the Israel-Hamas war. Israel is allowed to compete in Eurovision, even though it's not in Europe, because its national broadcaster belongs to the European Broadcasting Union. Golan advanced to the finals of the competition, where she was met with a combination of boos and cheers. 2 public schools in rural Virginia will be renamed for Confederates after the school board voted to reverse a decision to remove the names 4 years ago. On Friday, the Shenandoah Country School Board voted 5-1 to rename Mountain View High School to Stonewall Jackson High School and Honey Run Elementary to Ashby Lee Elementary. The FAA won't run out of funding after the Senate passed its Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization package without an amendment that would have funded the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP. The ACP is a broadband subsidy program which helps more than 55 million Americans. Human Rights Watch provided evidence of not only ethnic cleansing, but also war crimes and crimes against humanity against the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces in Western Sudan, Darfur. The targets were members of the Malasat tribe, many women and children who suffered looting, rape, and torture. The ethnic violence unleashed by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, and other Arab militias. Over 5 million people in Sudan are now at risk of starvation. Last week, a powerful solar storm caused minor problems with the electrical power grid, communications, and satellite positioning systems. The solar storm put on an amazing skyward light show across the globe, with sightings of the northern lights as far south as Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in the U.S. It could also be seen across the globe in Germany, Switzerland, China, England, Spain, and elsewhere. And those are the stories that Fox News ignored. No reason to ignore the solar storm, you'd think, right? I would think that would be something people would like that's not political, but they didn't talk about it. Okay, next up, I compare the top 5 topics on Fox News to the top 5 of the PBS NewsHour, which is a nonpartisan, high-quality news source. Here we go. Starting with Fox. Number 1, Trump hush money criminal trial, 25%. Biden bashing, 18%. Pro-Palestine protesters, 14%. Israel-Hamas war, 6%. And RFK Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr., the candidate, 4%. PBS NewsHour, top 5 topics for the week ending May 12th, 2024. Number 1, Israel-Hamas war, 26%. Pro-Palestinian protest, 11%. Author profile, 9%. Trump hush money trial, 9%. And the Ukraine war, 4%. Now, if you notice, Fox spent over twice as much time on the protesters than they did the war. And in stark contrast, PBS spent over twice as much time on the actual war than it did the protesters, which I think is the better ratio. Here we go for words used on Fox for the week ending May 12th. Here we go. Trump, 453. Biden, 388. Israel, 280. Hamas, 121. Jewish, or Jew, all the permutations of that, 54. Protests, 50. Palestinian, 47. Crime, 40. Economy, 29. Inflation, 27. Hillary, as in Hillary Clinton, 26. Iran, 22. China, 14. Hunter, as in Hunter Biden, 5. and AOC, as in Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, too. She always shows up. And that's it for the podcast. I'm losing my voice. I still have to watch a bunch of stuff today. If you'd like to check out Decoding Fox News, you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, Threads, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and my Facebook fan page. Also, if you'd like to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you can go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. I always need new subscribers, new supporters, because I always lose a few as I go away. That's kind of normal. It's the nature of the beast. And the podcast mascots who are making a lot of noise today, Odin and Thor. Thor being a tiny tuxedo kitty, and Odin being a long black cat. They send their love. And you can also find a version of this podcast on YouTube on the Resolute Square channel on YouTube. I will see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.